Hey guys, it is now that time of the season where I break down my jury scenarios for Big Brother 25. In this video, I'm going to be ranking the final two scenarios based on how likely I think they are to happen, and I'll give my forecast for what I think will happen in these final two scenarios. Now, at the time of recording, there are 5 players still in the game, those being Bowie Jane, Cirie, Felicia, Jag, and Matt. Now, obviously, Cirie is the target for this week, and now that the veto meeting has happened, it's looking very likely that she'll be voted out on Thursday night. So, with that, it's going to be very unlikely for her to get to the end unless something really crazy happens at this point. And I also think Felicia is pretty unlikely to get to the end as well. And even if she gets there, I just don't think she has that much win equity. And that kind of leaves Jag, Matt, and Bowie as really the top contenders to actually win this season. But within that, I think Jag and Matt are the pretty clear front runners, as I feel like Bowie is someone that doesn't really have too much respect at this point. And obviously, this battle between Jag and Matt is going to be pretty interesting. I think a lot of it will come down to competitions. I think a lot of it will come down to whether Jag decides to take the shot at Matt first. And I think a lot of it will depend on how much this jury really values competition wins and who they see as the more active player between the two, which right now I think is Jag, but I still think there's plenty of room for Matt to maneuver here. So it's still looking like a somewhat interesting endgame here. However, I think right now it's pretty clear who the frontrunners are. And then moving over to the jury, we obviously have 4 people currently on the jury, those being Cameron, Corey, Blue, and America. And I think across the board, it's looking like Jag and Matt are the favorites here. Now, within that, there's a couple bit of nuances here. I think for one, you have the fact that Jag has had pretty poor jury management with people like America, to where I could see a world where maybe they're not as high on him if he gets the end with, say, Matt, for example. I think that could be an interesting element of all this. But I still think that if Jag keeps winning out, I think people are just going to naturally see him as the bigger player due to him winning HOHs and vetoes and making all these decisions, while Matt could be seen as a bit more passive. So I think that's a factor to consider. I think in general, Bowie's the least likely of the 3 to get the respect of this jury, considering how they've talked about them in exit interviews. I think Cameron's probably the highest out of these 4 when it comes to Bowie, though even then, I feel like he'll probably vote for Jag and Matt over her. And when we're talking about like Cirie and Felicia, I mean, we obviously know that people like a Corey, America, even a Blue seem pretty high on Cirie and could be open to voting for her if she gets to the end, but obviously it's pretty unlikely. And I don't think Felicia is very high on many of these people's raters either. So really, a lot of this will be a battle between Matt and Jag, and simply seeing which one this jury prefers over them. Now, obviously, we still have a week of the game left, and we're still going to have 3 more people join the jury between now and finale night, so obviously that can still change some things, but for right now, it's looking like Jag and Matt are in it to win it between these 4. So that's what the jury is looking like at this point, as well as our contenders here. But with all that out of the way, there are 10 scenarios to get into here, and unless I waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 10, the final 2 scenario that is the least likely to happen from this point on should be very obvious, and here we have Cirie versus Felicia. And obviously, this one's pretty much impossible as Cirie and Felicia are currently on the block, and one of those 2 will definitely be going home on Thursday unless something really crazy happens, like someone quits or something. But again, very unlikely we're even going to get this scenario. But if it were to happen, I do think Cirie will win pretty decisively here, where I don't really see Felicia getting any votes, particularly over Cirie, where I don't think Felicia is particularly well respected by most of these players, and I feel like they're probably going to give the win to Cirie over her. They're probably going to see her as the bigger player. But again, this is probably Cirie's best case scenario, obviously, but at this point, it's not looking like it's going to happen, so it's here, number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and obviously these next few scenarios are also very unlikely as they involve Cirie, who is the current target for this week. And at number 9, I do have Bowie Jane versus Cirie. And I feel like this one's less likely, as I feel like Bowie Jane has shown that she's very loyal to Matt and Jag, and I find it very unlikely that she would flip the game in order to go to the end with Cirie, cutting both of them along the way. So I don't think this scenario is particularly likely. Now, if it were to happen, I think Cirie probably wins. Now, I do see Bowie getting some votes, particularly from Cameron, Jag, and maybe Matt, though I could see Matt going either way. But I still think Cirie will probably get the other votes and win. I feel like this is probably one of Bowie's better case scenarios, if I'm being honest. But at the end of the day, I still don't see how Cirie doesn't win this scenario. But again, Cirie's a target. It's looking like she's going home, which is why it's here number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have a very similar scenario, and here we have Cirie versus Jag, and I feel like this one's pretty similar to the Bowie one. The reason I have it above the Bowie scenario is that I could see a world where Jag recognizes that maybe Cirie's easier to beat, as part of the reason why he's targeting Cirie over Felicia is that he sees Cirie as better in competitions. Though, if the vote were to somehow flip, I could see a world where Jag could maybe cut Matt. And at that point, like, he could see Bowie's maybe being a better jury threat at 3, which could in turn result in him taking Cirie to the end. And I think if this scenario were to happen, I think it would be kind of up in the air, though I do have Jag ultimately winning it, getting most of the votes here. People from Cameron, Blue, Bowie, and Matt. That alone is enough to win. Now, obviously, Corey and America are very interesting votes here, where even though Corey has been very high on Cirie while they were in the house together, and obviously Corey has seen Cirie as this great Survivor player, he did say on the live feeds before being evicted that he would have voted for Jag and Matt over anyone. And between Jag and Matt, he said that he would prefer Jag, which is a very interesting take, sort of seeing how things are. And I think as he probably spent more time in the jury house, he probably listened more to the people like Cameron that could convince him that Jag's a better player than Cirie. So actually, I do think Corey probably votes Jag based purely off what he said. And I think along those lines, I think America probably also follows suit here, especially since America doesn't seem as knowledgeable about Survivor compared to Corey, and yet Corey still decides to side with Jag over Cirie. So while they could be up in the air, I still think they probably lean Jag. And the one vote for Cirie is probably Felicia, as Jag's been very annoying to Felicia, so I don't think Felicia would really care that much about voting for Jag here. So again, it's still looking like a decisive Jag victory here, even though the scenario is very unlikely, but I do have it here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have the highest ranked scenario involving Cirie in it, but here we have Cirie versus Matt. And obviously this is a top one, as Matt is the closest to Cirie out of anyone in that trio of Matt, Jag, and Bowie. And really, it was largely his own fault that Cirie was the target this week, where he first put her up on the block after saying that he wouldn't put her up during the double, and then just sort of caving in so quickly to allow Cirie to be the target here. And while he still has some capacity to allow a flip to happen, I don't think it's particularly likely. Now, again, the reason I have this one above the one with Jag and Bowie is that if the vote were to flip at the last second, I think it makes more sense for Matt to take Cirie to the end over the likes of Jag and Bowie, where obviously due to that relationship, I think Matt is more inclined to take a shot at Jag at that point at Final 4. So obviously that's why I have it above here. And I think if it were to happen, I think Matt probably beats Cirie. Now again, there's still some question marks over certain votes here, particularly with the likes of Corey, America, and Felicia. I still think Corey and America lean Matt in this situation, sort of similar to what I said a moment ago about Jag. And I think Felicia is also an interesting swing vote here, as I think she had a better relationship with Matt than Jag, to where I could see a world where she votes for Matt over Cirie. Either way, doesn't matter, as Matt still wins in this scenario, but it's just one additional wrinkle to this scenario. But ultimately, I don't think it's happening either, which is why it's here number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and from this point on, these are all scenarios that could happen, assuming the rest of the week plays out normally. It's just a matter of ordering them. But number 6, I did decide to go with Bowie versus Felicia here, and I feel like this one's the least likely, as 1, Bowie's probably the most loyal of Bowie, Matt, and Jag to remain loyal to that group, and obviously this scenario would involve like them being cut all the way down. And even if Bowie isn't the one to turn against one of them at Final 4, even if it's a Final 3 where it's Bowie, Felicia, and one of Matt or Jag, I still think Bowie probably cuts Felicia at 3 to allow herself to get to the end with one of those people. I feel like the only way for us to get the scenario is if Felicia wins out, where again, if she like wins a comp at Final 4, that ensures that one of Bowie, Matt, and Jag are broken up. And then at Final 3, she wins Final HOH, cuts one of Matt or Jag to take Bowie to the end, thinking that Bowie's the easier beat there, which again, considering that this is Bowie, Matt, and Jag, I feel like it's very unlikely that those 3 lose all those comps to allow Felicia to be in that position to begin with. And even if this scenario were to happen, even if Felicia were to win out in this case, I think she probably wins, though it's definitely up in the air. Where first up, I think Felicia gets the votes of Corey and America. They seemed kind of low on Bowie on their way out, particularly America, and I just can't see how they respect Bowie's game in that situation. I think Blue's also likely Felicia vote here, as even though she doesn't have the greatest relationship with Felicia, I don't think she has a very good relationship with Bowie either, as she literally described Bowie in her exit interview as who? So I think that could be a factor here. I do think Bowie would get the votes of Cameron, Jag, and Matt here. And then I think Cirie could be an interesting vote, where on one hand, I think Cirie could vote for Bowie, considering that she doesn't have a very strong relationship with Felicia. Felicia is someone that Cirie has gotten on the nerves of a number of times. So I think that's a factor here. But I also think there could be a case where Felicia does win out and take out these big threats, that there could be an element of respect that Cirie could give to Cirie in that case. So it's looking like it's going to be a pretty close vote here, where it's going to be 4-3 either way. But for this video, I did decide to give Felicia the edge here. But realistically, I don't think the scenario is super likely, which is why it's here number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and if I made this video like 2 weeks ago, I probably would have had this scenario at number 1. But at this point, I don't think it's very likely, and here we have Jag versus Matt. And obviously, this scenario did seem likely for a while, as it seemed like they were bound to take each other to the end. However, we saw in recent weeks that Matt was willing to take a shot at Jag at 4 in order to allow himself to get to the end. And at this point, Jag is also looking to cut Matt, as 1, he found out that Matt was planning to cut him at some point, and 2, he noticed people on the way out seeming higher on Matt compared to Jag. So to that end, I don't think either of them are taking each other to the end at this point. Now, granted, the circumstances that could lead to this final 2 aren't as crazy and outlandish compared to the ones we already talked about, though it still would be kind of wonky for this final 2 to happen, considering that these two are planning to go for each other. Now, if this scenario were to happen, I know people have said that Matt would win it. However, I think if we are to get to the end here, I think Jag might pull it out, as he has won more competitions. He's technically had to play the game more than Matt. And I think with Matt coming off as a bit passive, and I think with his suboptimal play during this round of allowing Cirie to go, I think people will come to respect Jag a bit more compared to Matt at the end of the day. Where first up, I think Jag gets the votes of Cameron and Corey. And I think with that comes America too, so that's 3 votes right there. And I think he secures the win with Bowie's vote, as Bowie appears to be closer to Jag than to Matt. Now, I think Matt still has some opportunities to get some votes here. I think Cirie could be a vote for him. I also think Felicia could be a vote for him as well. And even Blue could be a bit up in the air, though realistically, I think she probably leans Jag at the end of the day. So I still think Jag probably pulls it out, though Matt could get some votes here depending on how things go. But for right now, I do have the scenario here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we have a scenario that maybe isn't the most likely in the world, but I feel like if things go wrong during the final 4, I could easily see it happening. And here we have Felicia versus Matt here. And I think if Bowie gets cut at final 4 through some weird comp results, then I could easily see Felicia being the one that Matt and Jag decide to drag to the end here. Again, like all it would take is for Bowie to be cut along the way, and I think Felicia probably gets to the end with one of Matt or Jag. Now, realistically, I think if this scenario were to happen, I think Matt would sweep the jury vote, as I feel like Matt's a more playable option compared to Felicia, though it's still one that's a bit more likely to happen than ones we already talked about. But again, I only have it here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we have a very similar scenario, and here we have Felicia versus Jag. And again, I think this one's very similar. I feel like Jag's a bit more likely to win out from this point compared to Matt, especially with Jag being a bit better built for some of the endgame comps. Like, I think he's a bit more well-rounded in mental comps. I think that opens it up for Jag to get the scenario if, again, Bowie gets cut along the way. And I think it's a very similar scenario. I think Jag will probably sweep the jury here, not really making things too competitive. But again, I feel like this is definitely one of the more likely scenarios, but not the most likely, which is why it's here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and I feel like these top 2 are very straightforward, not too exciting here, but here we have Bowie versus Matt. And I feel like these top 2 scenarios both follow the general trajectory of the season, where I feel like Bowie, Matt, and Jag are just going to win out. They're going to take each other to the end, and it's really just who's going to get to sit next to Bowie at the end. And I feel like this is obviously the scenario where Matt is able to win that battle against Jag, cut him, take Bowie to the end. And spoiler alert, if this scenario were to happen, I think Matt would win very decisively here. I don't really see Bowie getting any votes here. Not too exciting here. But again, it's not the most likely scenario, which is why I have it here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the final 2 scenario I believe is the most likely to happen is Bowie versus Jag. And again, I feel like this one's also incredibly straightforward, where I could very easily see it happening. Where at Final 4, maybe Jag wins HOH, Bowie wins veto, and through that Jag convinces Bowie to cut Matt here, or alternatively, Bowie wins HOH, Jag wins veto, and then Jag just straight up cuts Matt here, thinking that Felicia would be much easier to beat in Final 3 HOH, or maybe the other way around, where maybe they cut Felicia at Final 4, Final 3, Jag wins Final HOH, cuts Matt, and takes Bowie here. I feel like there are several very viable ways in which this Final 2 scenario were to happen, and I think if it does happen, I think Jag also wins pretty decisively here. Now, the one question is whether Felicia votes for Jag, as I feel like Felicia doesn't have a very good relationship with Jag, though considering that it'd be against effing Bowie Jane, I think it's still possible that Felicia votes for Jag at the end of the day. I don't think this scenario really presents much intrigue at all, if you ask me. But again, it's still one that's pretty likely to happen, considering how Jag seems to be better at comms compared to Matt, and I think Jag will have the foresight to cut Matt along the way to ensure that he gets the win at the end, which is why I do have this scenario here at number 1. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out the channel. Now, obviously, we're nearing the end game for Big Brother 25. I'll be live streaming both the live show on Thursday, as well as the finale the following Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Following the season, I plan to do a player ranking, so you can expect that down the road. I'm still covering Survivor 45, Amazing Race 35, and Survivor UK, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I am on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.